Hey everyone, Tyron here from Africa Budget Pellet Gunner, and as always I've got something interesting for you this week. So this is a video that I've been working on for a very long time, and I've left some breadcrumbs as we go along on the channel as well, so definitely something that is very near to my heart as well. So as you can see in the thumbnail, I'm asking you, what should your first rifle be? And my answer is going to be, you should start off with a CO2 rifle. And you might ask, but what's the criteria that we're looking at? And I'm aiming this at people that are buying a rifle for the first time, so people that are new to the world of air guns, as well as to, if you want to get a young shooter involved in the sport, then definitely you want to watch this video. Which other ones? Well, if you want something that's backyard friendly, then definitely this will appeal to you. And if you want something that's really going to put a big smile on your face every time you get the chance to shoot it, then definitely you also want to stick around for this video as well. So let's get started then. In this video I'm going to be comparing things like Artemis CP2 to something like this, a Springer. And most people, the first rifle that they buy is usually a Springer of some sort. And in this video I'm not referring to high-end Springers or high-end CO2 rifles. This is purely budget stuff, so anything basically under $300, if you include all your optics and everything like that, then definitely this is where I'm heading. But before we get too deep into it, I first want to say just a disclaimer. I'm not a professional by any means, and I am not sponsored in any way by any company whatsoever. Everything I do on my channel is out of my own cost and out of what my subscribers are supporting me with. And all that I'm saying here today is also based on my own opinion, my experiences with the rifles, and how I've found and what I've found works best. So let's get cracking. And I've got 7 massive points to share with you. Point number 1, safety. So is CO2 safer than a break barrel? Well, in my eyes, most definitely. And I'm sure you've seen this many times. People tell you, you break the barrel, you never let go of the barrel. Why is that? Well, if you let go of it, it's going to snap back, and if you're busy loading something in here, or you're busy doing anything in this area, your fingers and your digits are definitely in danger. So if ever you're busy with a spring rifle, there's always the chance of a safety incident happening, and even more so on budget rifles, because these are not manufactured to the greatest specifications, and sometimes some of them do not even have any safety factors on them. So definitely in this instance, when it comes to safety, a CO2 rifle is much safer. And because the gas is in a liquid form, once it escapes, it doesn't really have that high pressure that it would have when it's inside here, because it's in a liquid form. So the only little bit of a risk is if it's leaking through, but it's nowhere near where it's going to affect you. And when you're loading and things like that, there's no danger compared to a break barrel. So definitely, in terms of safety, a CO2 rifle is way better than a spring rifle. The second point I want to discuss is practicality and efficiency. So what do I mean by practicality and efficiency? Well, you remember last year I did this challenge with speed shooting, and that was 7 shots, I think, within 12 seconds or something like that. So definitely, in terms of being practical to use, these CO2 rifles are way more practical. You get nice little magazines, you can do follow-up shots. So speed and ease of use is way better than a Springer. I mean, imagine taking this Springer, and this is not a very powerful Springer, and having to cock this 200 times in a day. Definitely, by the end of your session, you're going to look like Popeye, but you're not necessarily going to feel like Popeye. So definitely, when it comes to being more practical, more efficient, the CO2 definitely takes the cake. And yeah, you do get springers with magazine fed, but realistically these are not budget rifles. These are usually quite expensive, but it's still not as practical as having a magazine that's just easily loaded with a side lever or a bolt action. It's just much more practical and much more efficient. So definitely, when it comes to practicality and efficiency, CO2 rifle is way better than a Springer. Third reason why you should buy a CO2 rifle as your first one is Springers are optics killers. Springers and scopes just do not work hand in hand. And you do not have to take it from my experience or from my point of view. I'm going to show you some very well-known videos. Watch these short clips and tell me that I'm wrong when I'm telling you that a Springer is an optics killer.
I still had the scope on there from yesterday. I'm trying to just limp it as long as I can. I didn't contact Crossman today, but I plan to. But the factory scope on that nitro piston trail gun has already started to mess up. But
okay, another hotbed topic are the Springer rated scopes. Let me do Springer rated like this with huge quotation marks, because that's something that's way oversold. There are basically a few scopes that are actually made to stand the double recoil of a Springer. A couple that come to mind are the Clear Ridge RM, the Leopold 3-9 EFR, and the SWFA fixed powers. They have structures on both sides of the rector assembly so they can handle the double recoil. The rest of the scopes out there, except for maybe a few that I can't think of right offhand, are just cheap scopes. So if you put a $60 center point on your gun and you tear it up and you take it back to Walmart and get another $60 center point, no big deal. They've got about $11 in that scope. So even if they replace it a couple times, they're still making money. And 99% of the time, you're going to lose the receipt, you're going to lose the box. You're not going to be able to remember where all that stuff is. You're just going to chuck in the trash and go buy another one.
All's good. So in the mid 400 feet a second range, that's about half what it should be when it was new. So the spring's worn, it's weaker than it should be. The seals are probably worn as well. So that accounts for the loss of power over the years. Now this is where things start going a bit stray. So that pellet hit way low, then one up high, then a bit to the right, then just clips to the bottom of the steel. So I'm just listening for the ding and I'm assuming it's hitting where I'm aiming. And that one's a bit higher. Now I've just blown the side off my chronograph, and you know where the next shot's going to go, don't you? So that cheap scope just cost $200 or $300 for a new chronograph. And I've got to do that before my dad finds out, because it was his.
So, to make matters even worse, let's say you've got a Magnum Springer. No scope is going to hold up to a Magnum Springer. And if we're looking at in terms of budget, a budget rifle scope is definitely not going to hold up on a Springer. If you're paying $40 or $50 for a scope, don't expect it to last on your Springer. It might last 10 shots, it might last 100 shots, but definitely a scope on a CO2 rifle, this one is still going to be working 5 years from now without any problem, and that's a guarantee. And that just makes the CO2 rifle a much better option, because optics really improves our shooting and it makes our shooting that much more enjoyable. So definitely, in terms of optics, CO2 rifle is the better way to go. The fourth point in favor of the CO2 rifles is quietness. Definitely, these CO2 rifles are super quiet. Most of them even come fitted with the silencer, just like this one. Silencer, suppressor, moderator, whatever you want to call it. But these really do a good job of keeping them quiet. Here I've got a little modified CP1, and here I've actually got a 3D printed silencer on here, and it works great. And these guns are really backyard friendly. Believe me when I say, when you're shooting these, your neighbors will not even know that you're shooting. So definitely backyard friendly. However, when it comes to a Springer, a little bit of a different ball game, because yes, you can add a silencer in the front here. Some of them are threaded. You can add a silencer, but majority of the noise is not coming from there, but coming from the internals over here. So some people might say that, yeah, most of the noise is what you hear, but do the challenge yourself. Invite your wife to sit there with you. You shoot a Springer and you shoot a CO2 rifle, and I can guarantee you your wife is going to say the CO2 rifle is much quieter. So definitely, in terms of silence, in terms of being quiet, CO2 rifle is much quieter and much more backyard friendly in this respect. The fifth point is modifying and accessorizing. So on a Springer, yes, you can change the stock, you can work on the internals if you know what you're doing, you can work a little bit on the spring, on the piston, things like that. There is some things you cannot add, like for example a bipod. A bipod on a Springer just doesn't make sense, because these guns are so hold sensitive that having a bipod on there is not going to help you, and it's just going to make your gun extremely inaccurate. However, if you look at the CO2 guns, these are way more. You can add accessories. For example, here in front I can add a bipod, I can add a cheek rest like this. And the other nice thing about these are like the perfect platform to do modifications. I can change the hammer spring. I've actually changed the hammer spring in this one to something a little bit more powerful. You can work on the transfer ports, you can work on the valves. There's so many things you can do on these to make them suit your needs and to make them perform differently and better, and depends what you want. But definitely these are way more modifiable and also are much more leaned towards accessorizing. I mean, if you just think about the Crosman 2240, think about the numerous different modifications you can do on those. Some companies were built just doing modifications to the 2240, the Crosman. So, and well, there's some companies that's doing a lot of modifications for the CP2 as well. You can change the stocks, you can put 3D printed stuff on, but this kind of stuff is not really accessible for Springers. So definitely, when it comes to being modifiable, when it comes to being able to add accessories, CO2 rifles really take the cake in this case. The sixth point, and a point that's really valid for a lot of people and why a lot of people buy air rifles, is for small game hunting and pest control. And I recently did a video using this Artemis CP2, and I showed how effective it could be at ratting. And personally, I've done a lot of ratting with this exact rifle and setup. This rifle that you see here was specifically built for ratting, so definitely the CO2 lends itself to that. But then you might ask yourself, what about bigger things like squirrels, doves, pigeons, maybe even rabbits? And all of this is very possible with a CO2 rifle. In fact, I've actually done a video where I showed you can do pigeon hunting with a CO2 rifle, and I'll leave a link to it here in the description below. And definitely, if we think just a little bit further, there's a certain Crosman 2240 or 2250, and they aptly named it the rat catcher because that's what it was built for, that's what it was designed for. Definitely these guns can be used for pest control. But now you might say, but so can a Springer. And yes, I agree. Springers can also be used for pest control, especially for small game. I wouldn't go to bigger things like raccoons and monkeys and stuff like that with either of these options. But definitely a Springer can also be used for pest control and for small game hunting. But that brings me to the last point, and arguably the most important point. So let's have a look at point number 7. Point number 7, and most probably the most important point for anyone joining our sport of air guns: accuracy. Well, as you'll remember, I recently put out a challenge, and that challenge was to all budget Springers and budget scopes. 25 meters, 10 bottle caps in 10 shots. Psst, nobody's taken up the challenge yet. So I think I know why. It will be very difficult with the budget Springer and a budget scope to get 10 bottle caps in 10 shots at 25 meters. And there's various reasons for this. Number one, Springers are very hold sensitive and extremely difficult to shoot well. That's the first thing. Springers also tend to be pellet fussy, way more than their CO2 counterparts. So this also affects the accuracy of Springers. Another thing is many Springers need some tweaks in order for them to be able to shoot properly. So you might need to work on the breech, the crown. There's numerous things you might need to work on, and even more so the case when it comes to budget Springers. However, not the case with CO2 rifles. Oh, and did I forget to mention Springers kill scopes? Hey, just imagine getting your zero, 5 shots later your zero is somewhere completely different because your scope is not working. So definitely not the case with a CO2 rifle. With CO2 rifles you can use scopes for years and years and years without any issue. So what do we say? What can we conclude? Definitely CO2 rifles are way more accurate than Springers, especially when we're looking at the budget category. So you might be thinking to yourself now, well, Tyron, you've really run down all Springers, and definitely your points are valid. We all need to buy CO2 rifles. And that is my objective with this video. I want to show those, especially the newer ones, to get involved in the sport with a CO2 rifle. However, there is 2 points where there's a justification to buying a Springer, and that's in my opinion anyways. And the first one is perhaps you're buying your Springer so that you can practice and get trigger time for proper firearms, and the Springer is going to give you close to that simulation because you're still going to be getting the recoil that you would get from a proper firearm. So definitely if you're buying it just to get trigger time because it's maybe too expensive to shoot firearms the whole time, then perhaps a Springer could be an option for you, but you'll need to bear in mind the limitations that it will have. The second reason why a Springer might be the right option for you is when it comes to extreme cold weather. So when I say cold weather, anything below 5 degrees. Because of the CO2 and the gas that it uses, when it gets to very cold temperatures, the guns do not always perform as well. But bearing that in mind, I think most people are not planning on going out and shooting in -5 or 5 degrees and lower temperatures. Most people will rather be in their houses, maybe shooting in their basement, where the CO2 will still work just fine. So those are 2 considerations that I would maybe say the Springer is the way to go. But other than those 2, I think that the CO2 rifle definitely is the best way to go. Alright, so let's conclude this video. If you are new to air guns and want to buy an air gun, if you want a backyard-friendly air rifle, if you want to introduce a youngster to shooting air rifles or to the sport of shooting, if you want an effective budget air rifle, and if you want to put a big smile on your face every time you get to shoot, then buy yourself a CO2 rifle and you will not be spiked for one day in your life that you did that. So that's it from me, guys. Thanks for sticking around this long. See you in the next one.